In this video, we're going to look at the 2012 live-action musical adaptation of Victor Hugo's classic story, Les Misérables, and ask the question, how can one interpret this movie through the lens of the Eucharist? The main character in this story is a man named Jean Valjean. Valjean is a man who's been jailed for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his family. 5 years for the crime and 14 more for trying to escape. This prison sentence has dehumanized him to the point where he doesn't even have a name. He is simply referred to as Prisoner 24601. It's like God has forgotten him, as the prisoners proclaim.
Look down, sweet Jesus doesn't care.
Right before being released, Javert, the inspector, motions that Valjean forgot something, a huge plank that needed to be moved. Humiliatingly, Valjean retrieves it, further being exposed to his dehumanization. Upon his release, Valjean has an early hope for a new world of opportunities, with the cross in the background denoting his grasp to the newness of life. However, he quickly discovers that the world has no hope to offer him. He is refused work, lodging, and even water. The world gives him nothing, and his optimism quickly fades. This sets up a theme in the movie. The world is largely non- or even anti-Eucharistic. The world would not give Valjean's family the bread that they needed, so Valjean had to work against the system in order to retrieve it. The world then sent him to one of their prisons, where it stripped away his humanity. Even after prison, with a shimmer of hope at first, Valjean finds that his wretched view of the world still holds up. There is still no bread to be given for those who need it the most. The world makes us less human, not more so, because it does not give us the things we need. Everything changes, though, when Valjean encounters a Christian bishop one night. Valjean is cold and hungry, so the bishop welcomes Valjean inside his church and literally sets a table for him, giving him bread and wine to sustain him. He tells Valjean,
Our lives are very humble. What we have to share.
Valjean, jaded by the non-Eucharistic world that he has encountered his whole life, steals some silver in the middle of the night and takes off with it. The next day, though, he is caught and even tries to claim that the bishop gave him this silver, obviously just trying to take advantage of the bishop's goodness. To Valjean's surprise, the bishop responded this way.
That is right. But my friend, you left so early. Surely something slipped your mind. You forgot. I gave these also. Would you leave the best behind?
In that moment, Valjean experiences the gravity of Eucharistic embodiment. Not only did this man share bread and wine with him, a little Eucharist, but he also gave him everything that he had, even saving him from being arrested by the authorities. The bishop sends the police away and blesses Valjean, calling him brother and exhorting him to use the silver that he had given him to become an honest man. The film immediately cuts to a scene of Valjean praying.
What have I done, sweet Jesus? What have I done? Become a thief in the night, become a dog on the run.
This bishop's Eucharistic goodness towards him has left Valjean completely disoriented. The song that Valjean sings is a prayer of anguish, confession, and repentance. He is faced with the actuality that there exists a reality outside of the world that he has always known, even though this is all he had ever experienced up until that point. He says,
Take an eye for an eye. Turn your heart into stone. This is all I have lived for. This is all I have known.
The world had basically murdered Valjean when they put him in prison and gave him a number 20 years ago. He had come to hate the world that had always hated him, yet this goodness that the bishop showed him made him question everything. He asks,
Is there another way to go?
There is indeed. The solution, he says, is to escape from the world of Jean Valjean, the world that he had always known as evil, graceless, and non-Eucharistic. He's leaving it all behind. He says Jean Valjean is nothing now. Another story must begin. Through the Eucharistic act of this Eucharistic bishop, Jean Valjean became a Eucharistic person. Javert told Valjean that he forgot something, the plank, and this dehumanized him. The bishop told him he forgot something as well, the candles, and this made him more human than he had ever been. These are the two ways. Valjean finally took the way of the Eucharist, rather than the way of the world, the way of the bishop, rather than the way of the inspector. The next character that this film focuses on is Fantine. In a similar way, life has proven to be toxic and dehumanizing for Fantine. She lives a meager life, working in a factory to provide for her daughter, whose father abandoned them long before she was even born. When she is fired from her job, she is forced to go into prostitution, even having to cut her hair and give her teeth away for money. Yet unlike Valjean in many ways, Fantine maintains her Eucharistic character, even in the midst of her suffering and despair. Everything she does is not for herself, but for her daughter. She gives her everything she has. Still, she is banished to the slums, to work among the lowly and despised of society. In a heart-wrenching scene, after Fantine is done having sex with a sailor, she sings a song called I Dreamed a Dream, in which she talks about her expectations of what her life should be like versus her reality. She saw a hopeful world, one full of love, grace, forgiveness, and excitement. But however, she tells us,
then it all went wrong.
Fantine recalls her former love, the father of her daughter, and how he took her childhood in his stride. This is what the world is for Fantine, all taking and no giving. As Fantine sobers back down from her fantastic dreams, she tells us the cause of her predicament.
No, life has killed the dream. I dream.
And yet she continues to give, in spite of the ways that the world has wronged her. Cosette, her daughter, could be seen as a sign of the Eucharist, the gift that is given to her in spite of the fallenness and brokenness by which it came to her. Valjean, now the mayor of the town, comes across Fantine in the streets. While Javert wants to have her unjustly prosecuted, Valjean wants to give her grace and take her to a hospital since she is very ill. Like the bishop, Valjean considers this woman a sister. He gives her her humanity back after having it stripped from a night's work as a prostitute. In return, when she dies, she gives her child to him to take into his care. This sign of the Eucharist, the child, is passed from one to the other as they share this gift together. The next character we'll focus on is Javert. In this film, he is the embodiment of anti-Eucharist. At the center of Eucharistic living is a gift. However, Javert's worldview is centered around reward, the opposite of gift. The good get rewarded for doing good, and the bad get punished for doing bad. There is no grace, there is no gift. However, what makes Javert so terrifying is that he is not an atheist or even non-Christian. Rather, he thinks his worldview is a godly one. He says,
Honest work, just reward, that's the way to please the Lord.
and again he says,
Those who follow the path of the righteous shall have their reward.
Javert's sense of justice is one that is shaped by the world, not by Eucharist. He uses Christian language to reinforce his worldly notions of things like law, justice, and reward. In fact, he even sees himself as a guardian of the Lord's way. His worldview is as firm as the stars of which he is singing, the sentinels of order and light in the sky. At one point, Valjean has Javert trapped with nowhere to go, hands tied and unable to move. Those around Valjean wanted him to kill Javert, and this would be the perfect opportunity to do so. If things worked the way that Javert assumed they did, worldly and non-Eucharistically, then Valjean would have indeed taken Javert's life. Yet, in a surprising act of Eucharistic love for enemy, Valjean actually gives Javert his life, cutting him loose and letting him go. This sort of behavior does not make sense to Javert. What kind of person does this? He asks.
Who is this man? What sort of devil is he? To have me caught in a trap and choose to let me go free. It was his hour at last to put a seal on my fate. Wipe out the past and wash me clean off the slate. All it would take was a flick of his knife. Vengeance was his and he gave me back my life.
If one listens closely, this is the same musical score from the beginning when Jean Valjean prays in the chapel. In this moment, Javert is having the same kind of crisis that Valjean was having with the bishop. They both had to question everything they had ever known about reality. What does it mean for me if I can encounter the Eucharist? What does it mean if things don't always work the way that I thought they worked? There's the way of the Eucharist and the way of the world. Javert simply cannot live with that immense tension. He says,
The world I have known is lost in shadow. Is he from heaven or from hell?
Is he from heaven or from hell? Is what Valjean did godly or ungodly? Did he commit a sin against me? Or did he simply disrupt the way that I think reality works, non-Eucharistically? These are the questions that Javert is wrestling with, but he cannot deal with it. He says that by Valjean granting him his life, that he had killed him. He is reaching, but he falls, and the stars that once gave him a solid ground to stand on are becoming black and cold. He declares, as Jean Valjean did,
I'll escape now from that world, from the world of Jean Valjean.
The difference, though, is that Valjean escaped that non-Eucharistic world by becoming a Eucharistic person. Instead of dying to himself and becoming born again as Valjean did, Javert simply chooses to die. He did not love God. He loved his framework. He loved the world. But now, that world has gone. Arriving to the end of the movie, Valjean is close to death. Fantine reappears from beyond the grave as Valjean dances between the liminal space between life and death. This woman with whom he shared in the gift of Eucharist helps him to carry him into the next life. The bishop also appears, the one who set forth Valjean's path of Eucharistic living. Then the three sing the lyrics that sum up what it means to be a Eucharistic person.
To love another person is to see the face of God.
Les Misérables is a story about grace, redemption, and above all, Eucharistic living. It shows its viewers what happens when we take the gift-giving that has eternally taken place within the Trinity and then extend it to those around us. It makes us human, saves us from the fallen world, and explodes the common sense of the Church's appropriation of worldly cultural values. We are all called to be bishops, who make Valjeans, who take in Cosettes and forgive Javerts. We are called to be Eucharistic people in order that we may Eucharistize the world.